Hey, Chuggalos. It's Brew Crew Podcast, Barrel House, Advent Calendar 2024, Day 15, the day after the extravaganza. I'm SFIL. We're back here in my home, and today's libation that is coming at you is a really interesting thing. I can't wait to dig into this. It's from Anchorage Brewing Company, which I love. I think I love every beer that I've ever had from Anchorage. However, this particular beer that Barrel House has picked out for us today is a Kolsch. I'm not particularly fond of Kolsch's, never have been. So it's a beer style that I'm not particularly fond of, but a brewer who I'm very fond of. So I'm interested in seeing how Anchorage Brewing Company, who I like a lot, and they've done every beer I've had and every style that I've had from them so far, has been terrific and interesting, classic to the style with some unique flares that put their own kind of individual stamp on it. So really interested in seeing what they're going to do today with this Kolsch called The Machine. So interesting about a Kolsch. Let's pop this baby open and we'll start talking about it. This Kolsch has 5% ABV. Kolsch's are interesting. Kolsch's are often mistaken for a fruit beer, kind of a fruit sour beer, that kind of a thing. Kind of an early progenitor of a sour, kind of a pre-sour, sour-like beer. But that's actually not true. That's not actually what a Kolsch is. A Kolsch is an interesting hybrid beer, actually. It's a hybrid between a lager and an ale. How the heck does that work, Phil? You might ask. What a Kolsch is, it's lighter in color, as you can see, real pale, kind of pale straw yellow, and lighter in maltiness as well. So they don't have a huge 5%. Typically, is that's what the alcohol volume is. That's pretty typical, maybe even on the top end of it. There's less malt in there to make it lighter tasting, and as a result of that, there's lower alcohol, there's a lighter color to it, etc. Now, how do you get to Kolsch? Well, Kolsch is actually brewed. It's a German concoction that the Germans made, and it was made in Cologne, Germany, and it was a hybrid right from the start. So they made this kind of lighter lager-like brew, but they used ale yeast, which is top fermenting yeast, instead of lager yeast, which is bottom fermenting yeast. And ale yeast likes it warmer when it ferments. Lager yeast likes it cooler when it ferments, resulting in, for lagers, a crisper, cleaner finish, crisper, cleaner taste throughout the whole palate, but a crisper, cleaner finish, which is noticeable, and less hoppy nature, right? Whereas an ale likes to ferment at a warmer temperature. Ale yeast does, and because of that, you get these fruity esters that we all love about ales. So what they've done with the Kolsch is they ferment the heck out of it in a primary fermenter with ale yeast, and then once it comes out of the primary fermenter, typically they'll rack it off into a secondary fermenter, and then it'll spend the next 2 weeks basically at near freezing temperatures, very cold temperatures, and it's part of the lagering process. So they take it through the lagering process as if it were a lager, but it's already been fermented through the primary fermentation at a warm temperature using ale yeast. So it's supposed to impart kind of the best of both worlds, as it were. It's supposed to be a lighter beer with a cleaner finish like a lager, but it's also supposed to have some fruity esters to it, some spiciness that some of the hops can give it, and also some breadiness from the warmth of the fermentation and the ale yeast, right? So it should be a little bit bready, a little bit spicy, and and certainly some fruit esters. That's a characteristic of that, right? So should be maybe some floral notes in there as well, that the yeast is giving off, and the hops are giving off. So we're about to see, right? They typically also use noble hops, which is not uncommon for really either lagers or ales, but you typically see them in lagers more often, right? But so we're gonna get a little floral hint. We're supposed to anyway. So let's just taste it and see what it tastes like. Yep, right off the bat, it's real light in the nose, very subtle fragrance. A little floral, um, a little fruit esters, but man, you got to kind of search for them a little bit. I'm not exactly sure what I'm pinpointing there at all. Hmm. Um, it definitely has the sweetness is a little subdued. There's some sweetness there for sure in the malty character of it, but it's really light. It's light. It's light like it is. It's light like a lager. Um, and it doesn't have that, no, that richer, cloying, caramely, syrupy kind of a sweetness to it, like a typical ale does by using caramel malts and those sorts of malts that are a little darker, a little bit more sugary. Um, so you get that right away. There is a bit of hoppiness to it, which is interesting. Not nearly as much hops as a pale ale or an IPA or anything like that. But for a lager, when you look at the back end of the process, the brewing process, the fermentation process, you'd expect it to sit down a little bit. But you get a little hops. You get a little hops in there. Not so much on the aroma, although I do smell some breadiness now too coming up, which is pretty characteristic of lagers in general, but ales. Sorry, ales in general. But you'd expect that with an ale yeast. Um, but it's more subtle though. It's more subtle than a typical ale. I'm also tasting um, tart fruit notes, esters. These are esters again. Had a good discussion about this yesterday at the extravaganza where we talked about esters versus adjuncts. Adjuncts are actual fruit that's put into the actual fruit, and not just fruit. Sorry, adjuncts are anything additional besides barley, malt, yeast, and hops that's put in the brew as part of the brewing process. So if you put blueberries in there, or maple syrup in there, or brown sugar in there, or lactose in there, any kind of fruit at all, those are all considered adjuncts, right? And they're supposed to impart flavor and all that stuff. An ester is just it's like a pheromone. It's something that gives off a certain smell and a certain flavor that you get a hint at, and your brain translates what it's smelling and what it's tasting as something, typically fruit. So you taste grapefruit a lot in IPAs, for example, with the citra hops, right? You're not really tasting grapefruit. You're tasting the esters that are coming off of the hops in the fermentation process that make your nose smell something that it's familiar with, and your brain says that smells like grapefruit to me. That smells like lime or orange or lemon, or a melon or passion fruit, or whatever it is, right? So they're typically fruitier esters because when you brew with ale yeast at a warmer temperature, those esters are going to pop out. It opens up and it pops out, and you get all kinds of little fruit esters that are swimming around in the air, or in the brew, and then coming out into the air that you can smell as a result of the fermentation process. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, real light beer. It's a real light beer, super light beer. Um, it's interesting, but and I think for Anchorage, they definitely they did the style. They did the style right. It's a Kolsch. You can tell it's a Kolsch. A little bit more hoppiness than a normal Kolsch, I would say, from what I'm used to. Um, but real subtle on all the esters, real subtle on the flavor. Not much maltiness. The finish is longer than I expected. Normally, you expect a real crisp, clean finish like a lager. This lingers. This lingers a lot more. Um, I'm guessing because they used, I don't know what kind of hops they used. I couldn't find any information about it. Um, but I'm guessing they used hops that have a little bit higher alpha acid content in it. And maybe they used a little more than they would typically use for a typical Kolsch, because I got some hop bite originally, and there's kind of that long finish, which is also a real hop thing. So, not your typical Kolsch. I wouldn't expect it from Anchorage. They wouldn't do just a straight up Kolsch. That would be a generic Kolsch that anybody could recognize. They have their own stamp and footprint on it. If you're a Kolsch lover, you might really love this. I am not a Kolsch lover. I don't love it. I don't hate it. I don't really dislike it, which I have a lot of Kolsch's over time. Um, but it is not unpleasant, but it's definitely not my favorite beer. And it's just got some, I don't know, it's like a light, kind of a light beer almost flavor. Um, it tastes better than any light beer, commercially made light beer, sorry, that's mass produced. But it is, I don't know, it's um, pretty middle of the road. I'm not really just a huge fan. Would I drink it if someone gave it to me again? There's $1 million question. Yeah, I might. It depends on who else was offering me something else at the time that person was offering, so I could, choose between them. And if there was anything that sounded better, I would probably taste those things instead of this thing. But if it was a hot summer day and I just got done mowing the lawn and I'm all sweaty and coming back into the house, I might drink one of these. And I would certainly drink one of these over a Bud Light any day. Um, but a good old fashioned lager might still be just good. So kind of on the fence about this. I like it more than I've liked, I think, most all other Kolsch's that I've had. So kudos to you, Anchorage. You kind of got me there. You got me leaning there, but I'm still not a Kolsch fan. I would have to say. There's just so many more interesting beers out there, but I think they nailed it. They deserve to, get some kudos and credit for that. And so for that, I think I will rate them and score them as, drum roll please. Yeah, I got to rate it as a 3.0. 3.0, and no offense meant or given. That's just me and my preference for styles, and I'm just not a huge Kolsch fan. Believe me when I tell you that that's the highest rated Kolsch that's probably the highest rating or score that I've ever given a Kolsch by a long shot. I think they deserve a 3.0 because it's decent, it's solid, it's kind of up the middle. It's kind of like the beer I had 2 nights ago, but the night before the extravaganza. It was just sort of, yep, it's good, it's solid. That's a solid beer. I would drink it again. It's not offensive. If it were too sour or too light or off balance, well, it's pretty well balanced, by the way, I would have to say. It's just the style, right? So Yeah, I'd probably drink it again. I wouldn't run right out and buy it, but not because I think it stinks as a beer. It's just I don't prefer the style, and there's a lot of other fish in the sea, as we've always said. So anyway, that's it for me today. Anchorage Kolsch on day 15, and 3.0, 3.0 from SFIL. All right, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Have a good evening, everyone. It's going to be kind of a short one tonight. Yeah, 15 minutes. I know. It's short for me. Sorry. Anyway, have a good night, and we will see you tomorrow on day 16. Back again. Okay. Thanks. Ciao. I'm out.